All right, here is your international conflicts lesson. I'm going to read it to you, and I want you guys to have a piece of paper or pen or pencil next to you while I read this to you. If you do not have paper or this particular assignment printed already, part 1 of international conflicts, I need you to pause the video right now, go grab paper or print this out and have it next to you, and get ready to take notes as we go along, please. The essential question: what international conflicts has the United States been involved in, and what was their response? So how does the United States respond to each conflict? The United States Constitution grants specific powers to Congress and the President when it comes to dealing with other nations, especially during conflicts. Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution discusses the powers of the legislative branch, also called Congress. It grants Congress the power to declare war, the power to approve spending on the military, and the power to raise an army and navy. Also in Article 2 of the Constitution, it says, the U.S. Senate is also given the sole power to ratify or approve treaties. Even though negotiating treaties is a power of the President, the Senate has the power to approve it. This is considered a check on the President's power. Congress has used its power to declare war 5 times in U.S. history. You will need to know the definition of what is Congress and the power to declare war. You also need to know the Senate's ability to ratify or approve treaties. I wrote right here, it says need to know who Congress is for next week's homework. So you need to be able to match the word Congress with the definition for next week. Use the quote by President Franklin Roosevelt to answer the first question. Yesterday, December 7, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. I ask that the Congress declare that since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on December 7, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Empire of Japan. I highlighted here, and if you have it in front of you, I'd highlight it too. It says, I ask that Congress declare, and then I highlighted this part that says a state of war. So the President is asking Congress to declare a state of war against Japan, and that was the beginning of World War II. Question number 1, based on the quote above, who has the sole power to declare war? Question 2, who has the power to ratify treaties? Article 2 of the Constitution discusses the powers of the executive branch and grants the President the title of Commander-in-Chief. This means the President is in charge of the military and he has the power to send troops overseas. You need to know what Commander-in-Chief is and whose power it is to be the Commander-in-Chief. Presidents throughout history have been known to interpret their power as Commander-in-Chief to mean that they can send U.S. military troops into conflict or warlike situations without a formal declaration of war from Congress. Examples of this include U.S. involvement in the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Gulf War, the first one, and the second Gulf War. Just FYI, guys, that means Congress did not actually declare war in any of those, even though they have the word war right in them. We sent our troops to fight in those wars, but we were not necessarily, our Congress did not declare war officially, but the President can move troops how they see fit. Number 3, use the statement by the President on the situation in Korea below to answer the question. In Korea, the government forces were attacked by invading forces from North Korea. I have ordered the United States Air and Naval Forces to give the Korean government troops cover and support. President Harry Truman. Which role of the President is Truman acting based on the quote? Is he acting as the Commander-in-Chief? Is he acting as the guardian of the economy? Is he acting as our chief legislator? Or is he acting as the negotiator-in-chief? Choose A, B, C, or D, and write that down as your answer for number 3. If you guys are not already writing in your answers, I would. If you have notebook paper, you should have already written down 1, wrote the answer, 2, wrote the answer, and number 3, you're writing down A, B, C, or D. There are several reasons that can lead a nation into international conflicts. These reasons might include military conflicts, trade issues, or violated agreements. The United States has been involved in several international conflicts throughout history. You will be asked to identify what methods the U.S. used during each conflict. The following list of methods should be considered as you answer the questions throughout the reading. So I'm going to have the same word bank available to you guys. Right here, all of these words are going to be available after every slide. So basically, after each conflict that we cover, I'll put this word bank back up so that as the questions ask you, what methods did the U.S. use in order to handle this conflict? This is your word bank. Did we use deterrence? Did we use isolationism? Did we use diplomacy? Right? You're going to pick one of these words, or two or three, depending on how many it's asking for, and you're writing those in based on the reading. I've also explained to you what the words are. So, you've got deterrence. The definition is something that discourages others from acting. So, for instance, a naval blockade, where we're blocking people using our Navy ships. Isolationism, that means a policy of staying by yourself and not getting involved in other nations' conflicts. You will need this definition on next week's homework. Diplomacy means negotiations or talks between countries in order to reach an agreement. Economic aid, that means sending money, humanitarian aid, sending money. Military force or intervention, including war. So when we declare war, when we send troops, whenever we sent in military force, all of those would be this option here. Making treaties or peacekeeping methods. Sometimes we just created a peace treaty. And then also economic sanctions. Economic sanctions means increasing taxes on goods coming from other countries, or even putting limits on the trade we do with certain nations. So when we deal with the conflict in Cuba, we put a trade economic sanction. So we stopped trade with this nation. Below is a list of specific examples of international conflicts in which the U.S. has been involved. World War I. It started in 1914 and goes until 1918. World War I broke out in Europe in the summer of 1914. Nationalists from the small country of Serbia assassinated or killed for political purposes the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. He was the heir to the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So whenever the Archduke gets killed, Austria-Hungary, backed by its ally Germany, had attacked Serbia in revenge. Serbia's ally, Russia, so the teeny little country of Serbia, the one who started this whole thing, they go and attack, they work with Russia, and they're going to attack back. Okay, and Russia's going to rush to its defense. Russia also called on its allies, France and Great Britain, for support. By August of 1914, all of the great powers of Europe were involved in this conflict. So it started off with one assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand from the country of Serbia. And so when the Serbian country attacked and killed this man, who was the heir to the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, when he died, it created this whole domino effect of every other country who had allies or relationships, friendships with other nations, and they all came to each other's defense, and it created a massive world war. The first 3 years of war, Americans remained neutral by not choosing a side in the war. This is a definition you need for next week's homework. And not participating in the European conflict. However, German U-boats, or submarines, attacked Allied ships with American passengers, such as the Lusitania, which turned American public opinion against Germany. I'm going to show you guys that this stuff in blue is all these here. It says these are the reasons why the U.S. got involved in World War I. So first off, German U-boats sunk, this is a picture image here, they sunk the Lusitania, which is a merchant ship. It was just selling and trading goods with Europe, and there was Americans on board. So even though we were neutral in the war, we were not participating. We were still selling goods in Europe, and Germany sunk they sunk a merchant ship and killed many, many people. In early 1917, when Germany announced unrestricted submarine warfare and began sinking American ships, President Woodrow Wilson asked Congress for a declaration of war against Germany. So the reason we got into the war, first off, they sunk one ship and it killed Americans, and then they started sinking any American ships that were coming near their coasts. That brought us into the war. You need to know that for question, I believe is number 4. Congress declared war, officially bringing the United States into the First World War to fight alongside the Soviet Union, Britain, and France. We were fighting against Germany, Italy, and Austria-Hungary. The U.S. sent military forces to support France, which forced the Germans to surrender. So the methods that were used here to handle this conflict, the United States declared war, and we sent military troops or military forces. The other one here is highlighted in green for you as well, but we're going to get to that in a second. This image of this newspaper shows you, it says votes for war. U.S. Senate stands 82-6. So again, this is, remember, Congress declares war, and one half of Congress is the Senate, and they are voting yes to declare war. The outcome of the conflict. Once Germany surrendered, President Wilson sailed to Paris, where he helped to negotiate the Treaty of Versailles, the peace treaty between the Allies and Germany. The final treaty was harsh towards Germany, and it was greatly resented by the German people. Germany lost its colonies, its army, and some of its territory in Europe. It also was forced to pay reparations, which means money. So all this money that the damages from the war, all that kind of stuff. We're talking millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars that they had to pay in reparations, and also they had to accept the cause of the war. Basically, we call that war guilt, and they had to take on that the statement that they are the ones who caused the entire war. Germany did. So the German people really resented this whole thing, and a lot of people believe that this Treaty of Versailles is what ends up leading to World War II. So I highlighted in yellow for you guys the outcomes of the conflict in yellow. So Germany surrendered. President Wilson sailed to Paris and negotiated this Treaty of Versailles. The peace treaty was one of our methods used, but it's also the Treaty of Versailles. You need to know that term for your homework. Treaty of Versailles is one of our outcomes as well. And you need to know how the Treaty of Versailles impacted Germany. So it was harsh. The people hated it. Germany lost colonies. They lost their army. They even lost territory in Europe. And they were forced to pay reparations and accept the guilt for the war. So for question 4, you need to know, why did we get involved? Again, that was on the previous slide, showing you in blue, I highlighted. Number 5, what 2 methods did the U.S. use to deal with this conflict? So we sent military and declared war. That's all one, military force and declaration of war. And then peace treaty is the other one. Treaty, peacekeeping. How did this war end, and what was the outcome? In yellow. You guys can summarize what is highlighted in yellow. Again, pause the video here if you need to write in your answers on your notebook paper for 4, 5, and 6. And go back. You can always go back and rewatch it. So I've got this after each slide showing you the word bank. So if you look back what I highlighted in green, you can look here at the word bank. In green, which one of these words would fit what was highlighted in green? World War II. The Nazi Party, led by Adolf Hitler, seized power in Germany. Hitler blamed Germany's problems on the Treaty of Versailles, on Germany's democratic government, and on the Jewish people of Europe. Hitler believed that different races were competing for world domination, and that Germans were the most superior race. He had ambitious plans for the German conquest of the rest of Europe. In 1939, Hitler attacked Poland. The Soviet Union attacked Poland at the same exact time from the east. Britain and France were allied to Poland, and they declared war on Germany. World War II began in Europe. Soon, Hitler betrayed the Soviet Union, and they quickly became enemies. So you're going to see, even though the Soviet Union attacked Poland at the same time as Germany did, they both attacked Poland at the same time. Hitler quickly betrays the Soviet Union, and then the Soviet Union joins forces with us. So we all are going to be attacking them and fighting against Germany, including the Soviet Union. Germany, sorry, I'm going to move my mouse to where we're at. It says German armies had overrun Poland, Belgium, Denmark, and France. So Germany is starting to take over all of Europe. Italy was allied to Hitler, along with the Empire of Japan. Just as Nazi Germany expanded in Europe, Japan conquered its neighbors in Asia. So we're going to be fighting against the Axis powers, which was Germany, Italy, and the Empire of Japan. The United States tried to stay neutral during World War II, not getting involved in the European War. However, in December of 1941, Japan attacked the United States naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. This deadly attack on Pearl Harbor officially brought the United States into World War II. You need to know what Pearl Harbor is for your homework, and multiple times in the homework it's mentioned. And this is what brought us into World War II. Okay, so when Japan attacked the naval base in Hawaii, it's called Pearl Harbor, this deadly attack brought us into World War II. We tried to stay neutral in Europe. We did not want to get involved in the European conflict, but after this attack on the United States, we had to get involved. Congress declared war on Japan, and Germany and Italy then declared war on the United States. The United States joined forces with the Soviet Union, Britain, and France, called the Allied Powers. They were fighting against the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan. The outcome. The outcome of the conflict. In April of 1945, Hitler committed suicide, and Germany surrendered in May. The war was over in Europe. However, the war wasn't over in the Pacific, so over in Japan and in Asia, we were still fighting. In August of 1945, the United States dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan, forcing its surrender. World War II is over. The Marshall Plan was used to offer economic aid to help rebuild Europe. So basically, I'm going to highlight for you guys, these are the methods that we used in dealing with the conflict. First off, we declared war, so we sent military troops. That's number 1 method. And then the second method for question number 8 is we sent economic aid because Europe was completely devastated and they needed financial help. The United States said we were willing to assist them, so the Marshall Plan was put in place to help them economically. So those are the 2 methods, and they're highlighted in green. If you look at in yellow, I highlighted the outcome. So we've got Hitler committing suicide, then Germany surrenders, and then you've got the United States dropping 2 atomic bombs on Japan, and they surrendered. That would be the outcome for number 9. And in blue is the reasons why we got involved for number 7. Please make sure you guys are pausing the video here and writing in your answers on your notebook paper for 7, 8, and 9. Again, if you need the word bank, I've got it here on the screen, or you can use your paper to look back at it. Cold War. The Cold War. It was from 1947 until 1991. That's a very lengthy time period. The Cold War is a long state of political tension between the communist Soviet Union and the United States and NATO. The NATO is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The term cold is used because there's not really any large-scale fighting happening between the 2 sides. So the United States and the Soviet Union, which a lot of us consider, like nowadays we call it Russia, we were fighting, but not actually fighting. There was no actual battle taking place. There was no physical war taking place. That's why it's called the Cold War. It was a lot of political tension. We disagreed with them being communist. We disagreed with their way of life, and they disagreed with our way of life here in the United States as a democracy where people get to vote and have a say in the government and having an economy that's based on markets. So it was a very, very, very lengthy time period of political tension. And it almost led to a big war. And we're going to see that on next week's work. All right, the Korean War. I'm going to go ahead and highlight for you the blue of why we got involved. The Korean War, 1950 to 53. Korea had been divided into North and South Korea after World War II. So here's a picture showing you guys the division. In blue is South Korea, and this is the 38th parallel. And then here we got North Korea in red. North Korea is communist. South Korea was not. North Korea established a communist government under the influence of the Soviet Union. In 1950, North Koreans invaded South Korea in order to reunite their country and to spread communism. President Truman, so U.S. President Truman, decided to send U.S. troops to South Korea to resist further communist expansion in Asia. So here's the North, they're coming down into the South, and they're going to try to take over the whole rest of this nation, turn it into one country again, but they want the whole thing to be communist. The U.S. wants to support this blue section here, the South Korea, because they are not communist, and we wanted to support any country that wants to resist communism. So at the time, we were very, very against communist beliefs, and we were trying to stop it from spreading. That's why we got involved. U.S. troops were under the command of General Douglas MacArthur. MacArthur quickly defeated the North Koreans and advanced into North Korea. MacArthur sent U.S. troops so close to the Chinese border that it brought communist China into the war. When MacArthur considered using nuclear weapons on his own authority, President Truman dismissed him. Before I keep reading, basically, so here MacArthur took our U.S. troops, we push, we took all the way over through North Korea. So we already won at this point. But MacArthur kept pushing and pushing and pushing, and he sent people all the way up here to the border of China. China, not happy about that. They're communist as well, so they support North Korea, and they come and fight, and they push the U.S. forces way back, and back to this line right here. And this is where it still remains today, this border, okay? The outcome of the war. The Korean War lasted 2 more years, and it ended in an armistice, or a ceasefire, in 1953. Korea remained divided along the same latitude line, just as it had before the war. South Korea remains a democracy, and North Korea is still communist. In green is our method that we used, the one method used, and in yellow is how we ended the war with an armistice or a ceasefire, and the country still being divided. Again, I would pause the video here, write in your answers on your notebook paper for 10, 11, and 12. Okay, Bay of Pigs invasion, last one for your classwork for week number 4. Bay of Pigs invasion, this happens in Cuba in 1961, my apologies. In 1959, Fidel Castro and his guerrilla fighters, it's a small group of armed civilians, overthrew Cuban dictator Bastilla. So Castro had raised money from supporters in the United States and had promised to establish democracy in Cuba. Once in power, however, Castro imprisoned opponents and he set up a communist dictatorship. So he did not follow through with what he promised. When Castro turned property, which belonged to the American companies here in the United States, into national property, meaning under the ownership of communist government, the U.S. President Dwight Eisenhower responded by cutting off trade and setting up economic sanctions. And he also tried to use diplomatic relations with Cuba. See if there's anything important there. So economic sanctions is one of your methods. Technically, we tried to use 3 different methods here, but diplomacy actually never worked. It didn't work at all, so we're not going to consider that a method used. President Eisenhower also gave his approval to a secret plan to train an army of Cuban exiles who planned to invade Cuba and topple Castro. The exiles, so these are Cuban citizens who were exiled from their country, sent out because they didn't agree with the communist dictator. So the exiles were armed and given special training by the CIA. That's the Central Intelligence Agency. They trained them in Guatemala and in Florida. In 1961, after John F. Kennedy was elected president, he decided to go ahead with the plan to invade Cuba. In April of 1961, 1,400 Cuban exiles landed at the Bay of Pigs. The Bay of Pigs is a small bay off the coast of Cuba in the Caribbean Sea. Here's a picture of it right here. This is the Bay of Pigs. This is the country of Cuba. This became known as the Bay of Pigs invasion. The United States led this attempted invasion in hopes of overthrowing Fidel Castro and putting an end to the threat of communism. So in blue, I just highlighted it for you. That is why we got involved. We were trying to overthrow Castro and put an end to the threat of communism so close to the United States. Cuba is only 90 miles away from the Florida Keys. The outcome of this conflict. The invasion was unsuccessful, and the exiles were defeated. Fidel Castro remained in power and continued to reign over communist Cuba. So we did not win this. All of the exiled men that were trained by our CIA were all caught, and it was completely unsuccessful. It was very embarrassing for Kennedy, our president at the time. Fidel Castro remained in power, and he continued to run the country as a communist nation. Pause the video here, answer the questions on your notebook paper, and then we'll unpause it when you're ready. All right, that should actually be it. This is just the last little word bank to show you guys again what for your methods used. I've been highlighting them in green throughout the video, so you guys should be good.